The streets of Atlanta never truly sleep, and anyone who has lived there knows the air is heavy with secrets, gossip, and temptation. The neon lights don't just glow, they pull people into their stories. Music leaks from every corner like it has something to confess, and the whispers that ride the heat aren't just whispers, they're warnings. But on this particular Saturday night, whispers didn't stay whispers. They transformed into screams echoing across social media feeds, hashtags flying faster than the eye could scroll. And at the center of it all stood three names that refused to let go of the headlines: Tamar Braxton, Mendeecees Harris, and Yandy Smith. What began as a birthday celebration spiraled into a scandal that left the city buzzing. Fans divided, and one woman waking up in her own home drenched in blood. Her teeth shattered, her nose broken, and her dignity hanging by threads. The internet asked one burning question, one that refused to die. Was this an accident, or was it the night Yandy Smith finally got her revenge? The night had started like any other. Tamar Braxton, no stranger to attention or controversy, joined her longtime friend, the outspoken media personality Funky Geneva, for dinner at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. The atmosphere was festive, playful, filled with wine glasses clinking, laughter spilling across the table, and photos snapped to capture a carefree moment. But Atlanta has a way of turning lighthearted nights into storms. By the time the group shifted to the infamous V12 lounge on Spring Street, the energy had shifted to dot inside the dim lights of V12. Something unfolded that nobody could ignore. According to multiple eyewitnesses, Tamar Braxton wasn't just mingling with friends. She was allegedly locked in with Mendeecees Harris, the man the world recognizes as Yandy Smith's husband. A man who has already dragged his marriage through cheating rumors, prison time, and public humiliation. The scene, as described, wasn't innocent. It wasn't casual. It wasn't polite. Eyewitnesses painted the picture of heavy energy body language, whispering louder than the music itself. Too close. Too comfortable. Too familiar. If you were there, imagine walking into the haze of flashing lights and bass-heavy music. Seeing Tamar Braxton and Mendeecees Harris tucked away in a booth, laughing too hard, leaning too close. Would you dismiss it as friendly? Or would your gut scream that something messy was brewing? For most of Atlanta, the answer was obvious. Eyewitnesses claimed, hands brushed too often, laughs lingered too long. And when the pair left the club together just after 1 a.m., speculation erupted like wildfire. And everyone knows what 1 a.m. in Atlanta means: temptation, trouble, and stories that don't end quietly. Now picture being Yandy Smith, a woman who has stood by her man's side through prison bids, scandal after scandal, screenshots, and receipts of infidelity. Imagine scrolling through your phone, watching the blogs explode with posts that your husband was spotted creeping out of a lounge with Tamar Braxton in the middle of the night. Would you brush it off as gossip? Or would the rage from years of embarrassment finally boil over? Hours later, Tamar Braxton posted a chilling revelation. She woke up in her home battered and bloody, teeth missing, nose broken, and the haunting part, she claimed she didn't remember what had happened. No explanation, no clarity. Just trauma and silence where answers should have been. That silence gave the streets permission to write their own ending, and their ending was brutal. The whispers sharpened into one clear narrative: Yandy Smith had snapped. The timeline was too clean to ignore. Tamar Braxton left the lounge with Mendeecees Harris. She invited him, Funky Geneva, and a few others to her home for an after-party. Even Funky Geneva himself admitted it. He confirmed the car dropped them all off, that Tamar opened her doors, while he swore he didn't stick around upstairs. His own words stitched the gossip together. And if the car pulled up to Tamar's house with Mendeecees Harris inside, and hours later Tamar was discovered bloody and broken, was it really a leap? To think Yandy Smith had found out. The so-called Yandy revenge theory wasn't born out of thin air. It came from a timeline that lined up too perfectly. The whispers grew into a running joke across social media, but nobody was really laughing. Memes mocked Tamar Braxton, with captions like "Don't play with another woman's husband," while comments flooded suggesting that Yandy's cousin Keshav, the woman rumored to be her silent enforcer, might have pulled up to handle business while Yandy kept her hands clean. The streets didn't need proof. They only needed a timeline and a motive, and Yandy Smith had both. But before we point fingers, let's not forget the mess already swirling around Mendeecees Harris. His reputation wasn't new. Tasha K herself had already aired him out with alleged voice notes, screenshots, and stories from women claiming to have been with him. Whether people believed her or not, Her platform had power. And her accusations put smoke around his name that never cleared. Then came the Instagram Live from a friend of Alexis Sky, who boldly shouted that Mendeecees Harris had been cheating since day one. Even though Alexis later apologized for being connected to the mess, the damage was irreversible. The world had already decided Mendeecees was not a faithful man. Even Yandy Smith herself had admitted to her own slip. She confessed to having an emotional connection with a trainer in London. A confession that exposed just how fragile her marriage already was. The foundation was cracked. The loyalty was questioned. So when Tamar Braxton entered the equation, the story wasn't just about a wild night, it was about the straw that may have broken Yandy's patience once and for all. Here's the part that makes fans lean toward revenge. Funky Dineva confirmed he received a text from Tamar at 10 a.m. the next morning, a desperate message, not playful, not casual. She asked for a dentist's number. That isn't the aftermath of a night of fun. That's the cry of a woman who had been physically destroyed by something she couldn't even explain. And still, silence. No denial. No confession, just speculation, cruelty, and memes feeding off her pain. Atlanta is a city where no secret survives. Everyone knows someone, and whispers run faster than the wind. The moment Tamar Braxton was spotted leaving the lounge with Mendeecees Harris, the story outgrew the club. It spread into the streets, morphed into headlines, and landed in the laps of fans who already believed Yandy Smith would never tolerate blatant disrespect. If you were her, would you? Would you allow the internet to once again laugh at your marriage? Or would you finally do the one thing cameras could never catch, make someone pay? That night, the gossip didn't just attack Tamar, it dragged Mendeecees, it dragged Funky Dineva. And behind the gossip, the silence from everyone involved screamed louder than any explanation could. Tamar Braxton never cleared the rumors. Mendeecees Harris never denied them. Yandy Smith never defended her marriage. That silence allowed the streets to build a story of betrayal, violence, and revenge, one that Atlanta wasn't ready to let go of. The whispers didn't fade after Tamar Braxton's bloodied post. They multiplied, spiraling into a roar so loud that even people outside Atlanta felt the vibrations. Social media feeds became crime scenes where fans acted as detectives, lining up screenshots, timestamps, and theories like evidence on a wall. And through it all, one name rose higher than the rest: Yandy Smith. She was painted as the mastermind, the silent storm behind the chaos, the woman who had finally taken matters into her own hands after years of humiliation. The timeline was dissected again and again. Tamar Braxton leaves V12 Lounge at 1 a.m., riding alongside Mendeecees Harris. They arrive at her home with a small group, including Funky Dineva. Laughter carries over from the club, the energy still buzzing, the kind of after-party where secrets are born. Then the splitsome people drift out. Some stay. Hours later, Tamar is discovered, shattered, bloody, her teeth gone, her nose collapsed. And yet not a single security camera or eyewitness stepped forward to provide clarity. In that absence, the streets filled in the blanks with what they already believed. Yandy Smith doesn't let disrespect slide. But let's step back and look at the psychology. Yandy Smith isn't known as a woman who yells or flips tables on reality TV. She plays the polished, strategic wife. She is calculated, business-minded, protective of her brand. And that very persona made the whispers more believable. People believed that Yandy was too smart to confront Tamar Braxton directly. That instead, she had others who could make a statement for her while she kept her public hands clean. And suddenly, the name Cousin Kesha started circulating again, a shadowy figure in Atlanta gossip circles, allegedly Yandy's muscle. The person who handled things the cameras could never catch. The blogs didn't need proof, they just needed a villain. And Yandy Smith became that villain with ease. Meanwhile, the memes turned crueler. Pictures of Tamar Braxton before and after the incident surfaced side by side. Captions mocking her as if her trauma was entertainment. Yandy's work. Yandy's work. Some laughed, others joked. Don't sit too close to another woman's man or you'll wake up like Tamar. It wasn't just gossip, it was public humiliation layered on top of physical pain. And Tamar, who built a career on clapping back, on dragging people with her words, stayed silent. That silence was louder than any response. Ask yourself, if nothing happened, wouldn't Tamar Braxton be the first one to go live, hair tied up, ready to set the record straight? Wouldn't she slam the blogs, deny the affair, and protect her name? That's the Tamar fans know. But instead, there was nothing. Just silence. Just the haunting image of her bloodied face and a cryptic request for a dentist from Funky Geneva. Silence can mean many things: fear, guilt, shame, or simply exhaustion. But in the world of love and hip-hop, silence is dangerous. Because silence lets the streets write your story for you. And while Tamar stayed quiet, Mendeecees Harris did what? He always does: nothing. His survival strategy has always been silence. He doesn't deny. He doesn't admit. He lets the women around him fight the battles ignited by his choices. It's a pattern fans have seen play out again and again. On screen, off screen, reunion, stages, Instagram threads. Mendeecees stands in the middle while the chaos rages, and he rarely lifts a finger to stop it. That silence has protected him, but it has also damned him. Because when you say nothing, people assume the worst. And then there was Yandy Smith. Her silence wasn't passive, it was curated. While blogs dragged her name through the mud, she continued posting pictures of family moments, business promotions, and inspirational quotes. It was as if she wanted to pretend her husband's name wasn't tangled in blood and scandal. But fans weren't fooled. They saw her silence as strategy, as proof that she was managing the narrative with precision. Because when you refuse to deny, when you refuse to engage, people begin to wonder if maybe, just maybe, you're guilty. At the same time, Tasha K sat back with a glass of wine, smirking in satisfaction. She didn't need to drop new receipts, her past words had already done the work. She had been screaming for months that Mendeecees Harris was unfaithful, that his loyalty was smoke and mirrors, that Yandy Smith was covering cracks in a marriage already collapsing. And now, with Tamar Braxton trending for waking up broken after a night with him, Tasha K's voice sounded prophetic. Her name trended right alongside theirs, her credibility soaring as fans connected her past claims to the current scandal. But while bloggers dissected the chaos, the real tragedy was being overlooked. Tamar Braxton was hurt physically, emotionally, mentally. And instead of compassion, her pain became a meme. Instead of sympathy, her blood became clickbait. Fans forgot that behind the headlines stood a woman who woke up in her own bed, covered in blood, not knowing how or why. That reality was buried under jokes, and maybe that was the cruelest part of all. Still, the theories didn't stop. Some insisted Tamar and Mendeecees were creeping, and Yandy made sure the disrespect was punished. Others clung to the professional excuse, saying Mendeecees Harris was allegedly cast in Tamar's upcoming visuals project. That's why he was around. That's why Funky Geneva was there. And that's why the night looked suspicious. But fans weren't buying it, because if this really was about visuals, why hasn't there been a single teaser, a single promo, a single frame to justify his presence? Why does the so-called project feel more like a cover story than a reality? The longer the silence stretched, the more people leaned into the revenge theory. Yandy Smith had motive. She had reason. She had patience worn thin by years of cheating whispers. And Tamar Braxton, fiery, bold, and unafraid of attention, had unknowingly become the spark that lit the fuse. The streets didn't just whisper it, they screamed it. This was Yandy's breaking point. But here's the thing: if Yandy Smith did retaliate, directly or indirectly, she didn't just send a message to Tamar. She sent a message to every woman watching, a warning cloaked in blood and silence. Don't play with my marriage. That's why the narrative stuck, why the memes multiplied, why fans refused to let go. It wasn't just about the violence, it was about the symbolism. And the aftermath grew darker by the hour. Fans dug up old interviews of Tamar Braxton, where she laughed about chaos following her, where she admitted she liked attention, where she acknowledged her tendency to flirt with fire. Suddenly, people weren't just asking what happened to Tamar that night, they were asking if she brought it on herself. Was she a victim? Or was she reckless until she finally got burned? The story refused to die because no one involved killed it. Tamar Braxton gave no clarity. Mendeecees Harris offered no denial. Yandy Smith played the polished wife role with strategic silence. And bloggers like Tasha K and Funky Geneva stood as unwilling narrators, their words twisted into receipts. With every passing day, the scandal grew into something bigger than truth. It became legend. So where does that leave the truth? Maybe hidden behind Tamar's silence. Maybe buried under Yandy's strategy. Maybe locked inside Mendeecees' refusal to speak. Or maybe the truth doesn't even matter anymore, because the story has already taken on a life of its own. The morning after the chaos, Atlanta felt heavier than usual. The neon lights had dimmed, the clubs had emptied, and yet the whispers from the night before refused to fade into silence. Instead, they stretched across timelines, flooding every corner of social media. Hashtags trended before breakfast, memes multiplied faster than the truth could travel. And the same names appeared again and again: Tamar Braxton, Mendeecees Harris, and Yandy Smith. What started as a night of celebration had unraveled into one of the most disturbing and talked about scandals the city had seen in years. And the one thing everyone could agree on was that this wasn't just about bruises or broken teeth, it was about betrayal, vengeance, and silence being used as both a shield and a weapon. By sunrise, the images of Tamar Braxton were already viral. The picture of her swollen face, the haunting detail that her teeth were gone, her nose broken, those weren't just signs of violence, they were signs of humiliation. And the world did what it always does. Instead of compassion, it turned her pain into a circus. Jokes, memes, cruel captions, and endless speculation flooded her page. The internet didn't see her as a woman bleeding in her own home, they saw her as content. They saw her as entertainment. And in that transformation, the real tragedy was buried. The questions grew louder with every passing hour. Who was in that house when Tamar went to bed? What really happened after the laughter from the club faded? Did she slip and fall? Was it random violence? Or did someone come into her home to deliver a message? The streets pieced together their own version, and in their version, the message was clear. Yandy Smith doesn't play about her marriage. The timeline fit too neatly. The motive was too believable, and the silence from everyone involved made the whispers feel like the truth. Because silence is a dangerous thing. Tamar Braxton, the same woman who built a career on clapping back, on defending herself loudly and unapologetically, suddenly said nothing. No live stream, no denial, no attempt to clear the air. Just eerie quiet. And that quiet became its own confession in the eyes of fans. Because if there was nothing to hide, why wouldn't Tamar shout it from the rooftops? If she was innocent, if it was all a misunderstanding, why let the world paint her as a woman creeping with another woman's husband and paying the price for it? Her refusal to speak allowed the narrative to spin freely, and the longer she stayed silent, the more people believed the worst. Mendeecees Harris leaned into his familiar strategy. He has perfected the art of letting storms rage while he remains unshaken in the center. He didn't protect Tamar, he didn't defend Yandy, he didn't clear his own name. His absence of words was louder than any denial could have been. Because the man who is innocent, the man who knows he's being dragged into a lie, fights back. Mendeecees did not fight back. He let women bleed, he let his wife be suspected, and he let his own name be dragged across every headline without lifting a finger. And that silence didn't absolve. Emmett, damned him. It damned him. Yandy Smith's silence, however, felt different. It was curated, deliberate, strategic. She filled her page with carefully chosen images, her children, her business ventures, her positivity. She didn't let the scandal touch her timeline. And yet, that very silence became the loudest scream. Because fans saw it as control. They believed she knew more than she was saying. That she was choosing not to deny because the streets were telling a story she didn't mind letting breathe. Silence became her strategy, her weapon, her shield. And with every polished post, the narrative of revenge grew stronger. Then there was Tasha K., the ever-present specter in scandals of this kind. She didn't even need to drop new receipts. Her past words resurfaced on their own. Her old accusations that Mendeecees Harris was unfaithful playing like prophecy. Fans pointed back to her videos, laughing that she had already told the world what was going to happen. She had been right before, and in the chaos of Tamar's broken face, she looked right again. For her, this scandal was vindication. She didn't need to lift a finger. Her work was already done, and in the middle of it all was Funky Deneva, the man who simply wanted to celebrate his birthday, by admitting he was at Tamar's house, by acknowledging that she texted him the next morning asking for a dentist. He became an unwilling witness. His words were taken apart, twisted, turned into receipts. He didn't create the scandal, but his presence validated the timeline, and in Atlanta, validation is everything. Without meaning to, Funky Deneva became the most credible link in the entire story, but the darkest truth sat beneath all of it. A woman was hurt, Tamar Braxton was hurt. And instead of outrage, instead of justice, instead of compassion, her story was consumed like gossip, spit back out like comedy. The trauma of a black woman became a trending joke, and maybe that is the real crime here. Her silence might have been survival, but the world didn't treat it that way. They treated it like permission to laugh. So, what really happened? Maybe the truth is hidden in the cracks of that night. Maybe Tamar and Mendeecees were too close for comfort, and Yandy reached her breaking point. Maybe the visuals' excuse was a clumsy cover-up, crafted to protect reputations that were already in shambles. Maybe it was an accident, and silence was chosen to avoid embarrassment. But the thing about silence is that it rarely protects it, only prolongs the speculation. And in this case, the speculation became more powerful than the truth could ever be. Because even now, the questions echo. If you were Tamar, would you stay silent after waking up bloody in your own bed? If you were Yandy, would you watch your husband humiliate you again and do nothing? If you were Mendeecees, would you let two women take the fall for your mess while you stayed quiet in the middle? The questions hurt because they cut to the heart of what everyone already suspects, that the truth is messy, ugly, and damning for everyone involved. And maybe that's why the story won't die. Maybe that's why, even months later, people still whisper about it in Atlanta, still post about it online, still ask the same questions with no answers. Because scandals that never get resolved live forever. Tamar Braxton's face became more than a headline, it became a symbol of betrayal, of humiliation, of revenge carried out in silence. And when the city moves on, when the lights of another club flicker, when the next scandal replaces this one on timelines, the questions will still linger. Did Yandy Smith finally snap? Did Mendeecees Harris betray his wife one time too many? Did Tamar Braxton step into a fire she couldn't escape? Or was this just an accident turned into legend by a culture that thrives on speculation? The truth might never come, but the whispers will never stop. Because in Atlanta, secrets don't stay buried, they linger in the heat, in the music, in the laughter that sounds too forced, in the silence that feels too heavy, and maybe one day, through a slip of the tongue, a leaked message, or a moment of honesty, the truth will come out. But until then, the whispers will remain, louder than screams. Circling three names that can't escape them: Tamar Braxton, Mendeecees Harris, and Yandy Smith.